Security guards dragged Jasmine and Naomi through the private terminal as smartphones recorded their humiliation. "These imposters don't belong on Mr. Davenport's jet," sneered the manager. When their father stepped through the glass doors minutes later, everyone froze. No one had expected Harrison Davenport himself to be black. Before we dive into this shocking story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. If you're ready to witness how privilege and prejudice collide in the most unexpected way, hit that like button right now and subscribe to see more stories of justice being served. Now let's get into what really happened that day at the terminal. The crisp white envelope arrived on a Tuesday, bearing a gold-embossed logo that made Jasmine Wilson's heart skip. The neurosurgeon recognized the Davenport Industries insignia immediately. Her trembling fingers carefully broke the seal to reveal heavy cardstock with flowing script. "Dr. Jasmine Wilson, your presence is requested at Harrison Davenport's annual Visionaries Retreat." She read the invitation twice before believing it. The Davenport Retreat was legendary among innovation circles. 5-day gathering of the brightest minds in science, technology, and business at his private island estate. Even more astonishing, the invitation mentioned that Davenport himself wished to discuss her groundbreaking neural regeneration technique. Across town in her sleek office overlooking the Atlanta skyline, Jasmine's younger sister Naomi received an identical envelope. As the founder of Equitech Solutions, a rapidly growing software company specializing in accessibility technology, Naomi had fought for every inch of her success. At 24, she'd already weathered more investor rejections than most entrepreneurs face in a lifetime. "This has to be a mistake," Naomi said later that evening, pacing around Jasmine's kitchen with the invitation clutched in her hand. "Davenport never meets with invitees personally. Everyone knows he sends representatives." Jasmine sipped her tea thoughtfully. "That's what makes it strange. I've never even applied for Davenport funding. How does he even know about my research?" The sisters had learned caution early. As black women in white-dominated fields, attention wasn't always positive. Just 3 months earlier, Jasmine had watched a white colleague present her research findings at a medical conference, claiming them as his own. Despite her protests, the hospital board had sided with him. Only her meticulous documentation had saved her career. Naomi understood all too well. Despite creating an algorithm that outperformed industry standards by 40%, her funding pitches had been rejected 26 times. Several investors who passed on her company later funded nearly identical concepts from white male founders. "Dad will know what to think," Naomi suggested, reaching for her phone. Malcolm Wilson had raised his daughters alone after their mother died from complications following routine surgery when they were just children. A prominent civil rights attorney, Malcolm, had instilled in them an unwavering sense of justice, alongside the understanding that they would need to work twice as hard for half the recognition. Davenport Industries' Malcolm's voice carried a note of surprise when they called. "That's interesting. You should definitely accept. This could be tremendous for both your careers." Something in his tone caught Jasmine's attention. "Dad, do you know something about Davenport?" A pause. "Only his reputation. He's famously reclusive, but has an eye for talent. If he's inviting you both, he must see something special." After the call, the sisters researched everything they could find about Harrison Davenport. The billionaire had built an empire spanning healthcare, technology, and education, yet somehow maintained near-complete privacy. No photographs existed in public records. His few interviews were print only. Former retreat attendees signed strict confidentiality agreements, but whispered about life-changing opportunities. What if this is some kind of weird setup? Naomi worried, scrolling through sparse search results. White America isn't exactly rolling out the red carpet for black excellence. Jasmine considered this. True, but we can't let fear stop us. If Davenport actually wants to support our work, this could change everything. The sisters spent the following week preparing. Jasmine compiled her research on neural pathway regeneration after trauma. Naomi polished her presentation on equitable AI development. They carefully selected professional outfits, knowing their appearance would be scrutinized in ways their white counterparts would never experience. The night before departure, Malcolm called to wish them luck. "Remember who you are," he said, his voice warm with pride. "You belong in any room you enter. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise." The sisters couldn't know how prophetic those words would prove. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Atlanta's most exclusive private terminal, a facility so luxurious it barely resembled an airport. Jasmine and Naomi Wilson arrived precisely on schedule, 3 hours before the scheduled departure to Harrison Davenport's private island. Their shared cab dropped them at the gleaming entrance where uniformed attendants stood ready. "Welcome to ExecuJet Terminal," said a smiling blonde attendant, stepping forward to take their luggage. Her practiced smile faltered slightly as she fully registered the sisters' appearance. "Are you here for a flight?" "Yes," Jasmine replied confidently. "We're guests on Mr. Davenport's jet to Seraphim Island." The attendant's expression shifted almost imperceptibly. "Of course. If you could follow me to check-in, please." The terminal's interior was all marble and mahogany, designed to coddle the ultra-wealthy through their pre-flight experience. A pianist played softly in the corner beside a champagne bar. Several well-dressed travelers lounged in plush seating areas, engrossed in tablets or quiet conversation. At the check-in desk, a man in an impeccable suit greeted them with professional courtesy. "Good morning, ladies. How may I assist you today?" "We're guests on the Davenport flight," Naomi explained, presenting their invitations and identification. Naomi and Jasmine Wilson. The attendant's fingers flew across his keyboard, his expression neutral until he looked at his screen. His eyebrows rose slightly as he studied whatever appeared there. "One moment, please." He picked up a phone, turning away slightly. "Yes, I have 2 individuals claiming to be on the Davenport manifest. Wilson, Jasmine, and Naomi." "Yes, they have invitations, but protocol suggests verification for unusual guests." Jasmine and Naomi exchanged glances. The terminal's atmosphere had subtly shifted. What had begun as standard procedure now carried an unmistakable undertone of suspicion. "Is there a problem?" Jasmine asked. "No problem at all," the attendant replied with a tight smile. "We're just conducting standard verification. If you could please wait in our lounge area, someone will assist you shortly." As they moved to the indicated seating area, another group arrived, 3 white men in expensive suits. The sisters watched as they approached the same desk, presented their credentials, and were promptly checked in. "No phone calls, no verification, no waiting." "Fantastic to see you again, Mr. Coleman," the attendant said warmly to the eldest of the 3. "Mr. Davenport's team mentioned you'd be joining today's flight. Please enjoy complimentary refreshments while we prepare for boarding." Richard Coleman, a silver-haired executive with the confident bearing of generational wealth, accepted a glass of champagne from a passing server. His gaze swept the terminal, pausing briefly on Jasmine and Naomi before he leaned toward his companions. "Looks like Davenport's finally embracing diversity quotas," he murmured, just loud enough for the sisters to hear. "Probably the help for the retreat. At least they're easy on the eyes." Naomi straightened, ready to confront him, but Jasmine placed a restraining hand on her arm. "Not worth it," she whispered. "Let's just get through check-in." More guests arrived. A famous physicist, a tech mogul, a retired senator, all promptly processed and ushered to the pre-boarding area. Meanwhile, the Wilson sisters remained in limbo, watching as staff repeatedly glanced in their direction before whispering among themselves. After 20 minutes, Naomi had enough. She approached the desk again, Jasmine following. "Excuse me, but everyone else has been processed. We have a flight to catch, same as them." The attendant looked uncomfortable. "Ma'am, we're still awaiting verification from Mr. Davenport's office. Perhaps there's been a misunderstanding about your role in the retreat." "Our role," Jasmine asked, her voice dangerously calm. "And what role might that be?" "Well, we have specific instructions regarding Mr. Davenport's personal guests versus support staff." Naomi placed her invitation on the counter with deliberate precision. "Does this look like a service worker's invitation? I'm the CEO of Equitech Solutions. My sister is Dr. Jasmine Wilson, head of neurosurgical innovation at Atlanta Memorial. We are invited guests, not staff." The commotion attracted attention. Richard Coleman wandered over, champagne in hand. "Is there a problem here?" "No problem that concerns you," Jasmine replied coolly. Coleman raised an eyebrow. "Actually, as Davenport's primary investment partner, most things at this retreat concern me. I don't recognize either of you from previous years." "That's because it's our first invitation," Naomi said. "Though I'm beginning to question whether Mr. Davenport's hospitality extends to all his guests equally." Coleman's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Davenport has exacting standards. I'm sure there's a simple explanation for the additional scrutiny." A manager appeared then, his badge, identifying him as Vincent Perry, Terminal Director. His expression was a mask of professional concern. "Ladies, if you'll follow me to our verification room, we can sort this out privately." "There's nothing to sort out," Jasmine insisted. "Either accept our credentials like everyone else's, or explain why we're being treated differently." Perry lowered his voice. "Ma'am, creating a disturbance won't help your situation. We have security protocols for all Davenport flights." "Protocols that apparently only apply to us," Naomi pointed out, glancing meaningfully at the other guests enjoying pre-flight amenities. She pulled out her phone. "I'm recording this interaction for my attorney." Perry's professional veneer cracked slightly. "Recording is prohibited in this terminal for security reasons." "So is racial discrimination," Jasmine countered, "but that doesn't seem to be stopping you." By now, several guests were openly watching the confrontation. Some looked uncomfortable, others curious. A few wore expressions of barely concealed amusement. Perhaps Coleman interjected smoothly, "These ladies are confused about which flight they're supposed to be on. Davenport's jets are exclusively for business associates and personal guests." "And what exactly are you implying we are?" Naomi demanded. Coleman shrugged. "I'm merely suggesting that miscommunications happen. The service staff usually travels separately." The tension escalated as more terminal employees gathered. Security personnel appeared at the perimeter, watching intently. The sisters stood their ground. Invitations and IDs still extended as the situation balanced on a knife's edge. "That's enough," Vincent Perry declared, signaling to the security personnel. "These individuals are creating a disturbance. Please escort them to the security office for proper verification." Two guards immediately approached, their faces impassive. The larger one, a white man with a military-style haircut, reached for Jasmine's arm. "Ma'am, you need to come with us." "Do not touch me," Jasmine warned, stepping back. "We have legitimate invitations and identification. This is textbook discrimination." Passengers were now openly staring. Some had phones raised, recording the escalating scene. Richard Coleman watched with thinly veiled satisfaction, sipping his champagne. "I'm calling our attorney," Naomi announced, dialing her phone. "And if that doesn't resolve this, the media is next." The second guard, an older black man whose name tag read Trevor, hesitated. Briefly, something flickering in his eyes that might have been recognition of the situation's injustice. Nevertheless, he moved forward on Perry's impatient gesture. "Ladies, please don't make this more difficult," Trevor said quietly. "Let's handle this privately." "There's nothing to handle," Jasmine insisted. "We're invited guests, same as everyone else." Vincent Perry stepped closer, voice lowered to a threatening hush. "Either you come willingly for verification, or we'll be forced to remove you more firmly. Your choice." When neither sister moved, Perry nodded to the guards. The white guard grabbed Jasmine's arm, roughly yanking her toward the security office. The sudden movement sent her phone clattering across the marble floor. "Get your hands off!" my sister Naomi shouted, lunging forward, only to be restrained by Trevor, who at least had the decency to handle her more gently. "This is assault," Jasmine called out as she struggled against the guard's grip. "Everyone witnessing this, I'm Dr. Jasmine Wilson being physically assaulted for attempting to board a flight I was invited to take." Several passengers looked uncomfortable now. An older woman whispered urgently to her husband. A young tech executive lowered his eyes, clearly unwilling to intervene. Only Richard Coleman seemed entirely at ease, exchanging knowing glances with Perry. As they were forcibly escorted across the terminal, Naomi managed to complete her call. "Dad, we need help. We're at ExecuJet Terminal being detained like criminals for trying to board Davenport's flight." Through the phone, Malcolm Wilson's voice was calm but concerned. "What exactly is happening? Are you being harmed?" They grabbed Jasmine. "They're taking us to some security office. Everyone else got on no problem. It's because we're black, Dad. It's so obvious." The white guard snatched Naomi's phone. No calls during security procedures. Once inside the small security office, the sisters were separated into different rooms. Jasmine found herself in a sterile interrogation space with only a metal table and 2 chairs. Through the thin wall, she could hear Naomi demanding her phone back. Vincent Perry entered Jasmine's room accompanied by the white guard. This could have been handled discreetly. "Dr. Wilson, if that's really who you are." "Check my credentials," Jasmine replied coldly. Harvard Medical School residency at Johns Hopkins board-certified neurosurgeon currently heading the Neural Regeneration Project at Atlanta Memorial. Or would you prefer to see my invitation again? Anyone can create a convincing forgery these days, Perry replied, examining her invitation with exaggerated scrutiny. Mr. Davenport's retreats are high-security events. We've had incidents with imposters attempting to gain access before. Imposters, Jasmine repeated flatly. Interesting that the only imposters you've identified today happen to be 2 black women. Perry's expression hardened. Playing the race card won't help your situation, Doctor, if you are one. I don't need to play anything. Your actions speak for themselves. Jasmine maintained eye contact. My hospital ID, medical license, and board certification are in my purse, which your guard confiscated. My credentials can also be verified through the American Board of Neurological Surgery, or you could simply call Atlanta Memorial and ask for the head of neurosurgery. We'll get to verification in due time, Perry replied. First, I need to understand how you obtained this invitation. Meanwhile, Naomi faced similar questioning in the adjacent room. Trevor, the black security guard, stood uncomfortably by the door as another manager interrogated her. Equitech Solutions, the manager scoffed. Never heard of it. That's your oversight, not mine, Naomi replied. We've been featured in Tech Innovator magazine and were finalists for the National Science Foundation's Inclusive Technology Grant last year. And how exactly did a startup like yours catch Harrison Davenport's attention? Naomi caught the implication immediately. You mean, how did a black-owned business get recognized on merit? Our accessibility software outperforms every competitor in the market. But I suspect you're not really interested in our technical specifications. The manager shuffled papers, avoiding her gaze. We're simply verifying all guests properly. All guests, Naomi challenged. Or just the black ones. Trevor shifted uncomfortably by the door, then quietly stepped out. Minutes later, he returned with bottles of water for both sisters, slipping Naomi's confiscated phone back to her when the manager wasn't looking along with a whispered, "This isn't right." Outside, the Davenport jet was being prepared for departure. Through a small window, Naomi could see passengers boarding the sleek private aircraft. Richard Coleman was visible at the top of the stairs, turning to laugh with another executive before disappearing inside. The sisters' belongings had been thoroughly searched, their invitation letters examined under ultraviolet light, their IDs scrutinized. Still, Perry insisted on additional verification directly from Davenport's office. "This is absurd," Jasmine said when the sisters were briefly reunited in the main security office. "They've boarded everyone else. The flight is leaving without us." "Not if I can help it," Naomi replied, discreetly showing her phone. "I recorded everything and sent it to Dad. He's contacting his attorney network right now." Vincent Perry returned looking smug. "I've spoken with Davenport's chief of staff. He has no record of any Wilson sisters being invited as guests. You're not boarding that flight." "That's impossible," Jasmine insisted. "We have the invitations right here." "Perhaps you misunderstood your invitations," Perry suggested with false sympathy. "Many service workers are needed for these retreats. Housekeeping, kitchen staff, massage therapists, perhaps." The insult hung in the air, blatant and ugly. Even Trevor looked away, shame evident in his posture. "You're making a career-ending mistake," Naomi warned, her voice deadly calm, "when this reaches the media." "Are you threatening me?" Perry interrupted. "That's another offense I can add to trespassing and attempted fraud." Outside the security office, a commotion was growing. Raised voices and hurried footsteps approached. Perry looked irritated by the interruption. "Wait here," he ordered, stepping out and closing the door firmly behind him. Trevor hesitated, then whispered quickly, "My sister's a neurosurgeon too. What they're doing, it's not right. Whatever happens next, I'm documenting everything I've witnessed for you." Before either sister could respond, the office phone rang, its shrill tone cutting through the tension. The phone on Vincent Perry's desk continued to ring insistently. Trevor glanced toward the closed door, then at the sisters. "Should I?" he began uncertainly. "Answer it," Naomi urged. "It might be important." Trevor picked up the receiver. Security Office Officer Barnes, speaking. He listened for a moment, his expression shifting from professional detachment to confusion, then unmistakable concern. "Yes, sir." "They're here." "No, sir, they haven't been allowed to." He paused, listening intently. "I understand. But Mr. Perry said." Another pause. "Yes, sir." "Right away, sir." He placed the phone down slowly, staring at it as though it might explode. "What is it?" Jasmine asked. Before Trevor could answer, the door swung open, and Vincent Perry strode back in, face flushed with irritation. "Who was on the phone?" Trevor straightened his posture. "Sir, that was—" The phone rang again. Perry snatched it up himself this time. Security Director Perry, speaking. His confident tone faltered almost immediately. "Yes, sir. I understand we have protocols, but these women don't match any approved." He stopped abruptly, listening. The blood drained from his face. "Mr. Davenport himself. But that's not possible. He never." Another pause. "Yes, sir. I understand, sir. Immediately, sir." Perry lowered the phone with a trembling hand, his expression transformed from arrogant authority to barely concealed panic. "Is something wrong, Mr. Perry?" Naomi asked, with deliberate sweetness. "You look concerned. Has someone made a terrible mistake, perhaps?" Perry ignored her, turning to Trevor instead. "Release their belongings, immediately. Prepare the VIP welcome protocol." He spun back to the sisters, his entire demeanor transformed. "Dr. Wilson." "Miss Wilson, please accept my sincerest apologies for this unfortunate misunderstanding. We'll escort you to our premium lounge while the situation is rectified." "Misunderstanding," Jasmine repeated incredulously. "Is that what you call racial profiling and physical assault now?" Perry winced. "A serious error in judgment that will be addressed, I assure you, if you'll just follow me." "We're not going anywhere with you," Naomi stated firmly. "Not after how we've been treated." The phone rang a third time. Perry answered it with visible dread. "Yes, sir." "They're reluctant to." "Yes, sir. I understand the consequences." 15 minutes. Yes, sir. He hung up, sweat now visible on his forehead. Ladies, please. My career depends on resolving this situation properly. Whatever refreshments you desire, complimentary services, anything at all. Trevor returned with their confiscated belongings, handing them over with a respectful nod. Everything's been returned exactly as it was, Dr. Wilson, Miss Wilson. I've personally verified. A knock at the door revealed a staff member bearing a tray with champagne and delicate hors d'oeuvres, the same refreshments that had been served to the other passengers earlier. What's happening? Jasmine demanded. 20 minutes ago, we were imposters being physically dragged through the terminal. Now you're serving us champagne. Perry dabbed his forehead with a handkerchief. New information has come to light. The flight has been temporarily delayed. All passengers are being asked to deplane and return to the terminal immediately. Through the security office window, the sisters could indeed see passengers descending the aircraft stairs, many looking confused or annoyed. Richard Coleman was gesturing angrily at a flight attendant who maintained a professional smile despite his evident displeasure. Have you ever experienced discrimination that made your blood boil, but you had to keep your cool to protect your career and dignity? Comment number 1 if you've been in a situation where you had to be twice as professional in the face of prejudice. Hit that like button if you believe justice always finds a way. And subscribe to see more stories of powerful comebacks against discrimination. What do you think is about to happen next? Who could have made that mysterious call that changed everything so suddenly? Keep watching to find out. Jasmine recalled a similar incident at last year's Neurosurgical Innovation Conference. She had arrived early to set up her presentation wearing casual clothes before changing into her professional attire. 3 separate attendees had asked her to refill coffee or direct them to registration automatically, assuming she was staff. When she later delivered her keynote address, their embarrassment was palpable, but the damage was done. The automatic assumptions, the instinctive categorizing of a black woman as service staff rather than a leading surgeon revealed biases too deeply ingrained to be easily acknowledged or addressed. This reminds me of that conference incident, she whispered to Naomi. I know, her sister replied quietly, just like when investors assumed I was my own assistant during pitches. While they spoke, the terminal had erupted into controlled chaos. Staff members were hurriedly rearranging the lounge area, adjusting flower arrangements, wiping down surfaces, and setting up what appeared to be a small receiving line near the main entrance. Vincent Perry's radio crackled. VIP convoy, approaching terminal ETA 3 minutes. Places everyone, Perry called out, his voice cracking slightly with stress. Wilson sisters, please come with me. We're staying right here until our attorney arrives, Jasmine informed him coolly. Perry looked ready to collapse. Please, you don't understand. You need to be in position for what Naomi challenged. More public humiliation. The opposite Trevor interjected quietly. They're positioning you as honored guests. Indeed, Perry was attempting to usher them toward the front of the hastily assembled reception line, displacing several confused executives who had disembarked from the jet. Richard Coleman pushed forward, face flushed with indignation. Perry, what's the meaning of this delay? We were scheduled to depart 20 minutes ago. A security matter, Mr. Coleman, Perry replied vaguely. And a special arrival. What special arrival could possibly justify? Coleman stopped short, noticing the Wilson sisters being escorted to the prime position. What is the meaning of this? These women were just being detained as security risks. Perry avoided his gaze. New instructions, sir. Directly from Mr. Davenport's office. Coleman scoffed. Impossible. I spoke with Davenport yesterday. He mentioned nothing about special guests. Certainly not. He caught himself, but the implication hung in the air. Outside, a procession of 3 black SUVs with tinted windows pulled up to the terminal entrance. Security personnel in suits emerged from the first and last vehicles, taking positions around the perimeter. The middle SUV remained closed security, standing at attention beside its doors. The terminal fell silent as every eye fixed on those ominous black vehicles. Even Perry seemed to be holding his breath. "What's going on?" Jasmine whispered to Naomi. "I have no idea. But whatever it is, it's big enough to turn Perry from our prosecutor to our protector in 3 minutes flat." Trevor, standing nearby, leaned slightly toward them. "They're saying it's Davenport himself, but that's impossible. No one's ever seen him in person at this terminal." The security team finished their preparations. One spoke into a wrist microphone, then nodded to the driver of the middle SUV. The driver emerged slowly, walked around to the passenger door with ceremonial precision, and opened it with a white-gloved hand. Time seemed to slow as a polished shoe appeared on the vehicle's running board, followed by a tailored pant leg. Then, rising to his full height, with the dignified bearing of unquestionable authority, stepped a distinguished black man in his early 60s, Malcolm Wilson, their father. The terminal collectively gasped. Vincent Perry turned a shade paler. Richard Coleman's champagne glass slipped from his fingers, shattering on the marble floor. No one moved. No one spoke. The silence was absolute. And in that frozen moment of collective shock, Malcolm Wilson surveyed the scene with calm, penetrating eyes that missed nothing, especially his daughter's stunned expressions. Malcolm Wilson stood framed in the terminal doorway, sunlight creating an almost ethereal glow around his imposing figure. His bespoke charcoal suit bore subtle gold cufflinks, the same Davenport Industries insignia that had adorned the sisters' invitations. 4 security personnel flanked him, their alert postures suggesting this was no ordinary visitor. Vincent Perry was first to break the paralysis, rushing forward with an obsequiousness that bordered on comical given his earlier behavior. "Mr. Davenport, what an unexpected honor. Had we known you were coming personally." Malcolm raised a hand, silencing Perry mid-sentence. His gaze swept the terminal, cataloging the assembled guests, the security personnel, and finally landing on his daughters. Something flickered in his eyes. Concerned pride, and perhaps a hint of apology, where he asked in a voice accustomed to courtroom command, "Are Dr. Jasmine and Miss Naomi Wilson?" Perry gestured frantically toward the sisters. "Right here, sir. We were just escorting them to the VIP lounge after a minor misunderstanding." Malcolm strode forward, his security detail moving in perfect synchronization around him. The terminal guests parted automatically, creating a path. He stopped directly in front of Jasmine and Naomi, whose expressions remained frozen in shock. "Are you both all right?" he asked, his public persona momentarily slipping to reveal paternal concern. "Dad," Jasmine whispered, her voice barely audible. "What is happening?" Malcolm squeezed her hand discreetly, then turned to address the terminal. "It appears there has been a significant failure in my security protocols today." His voice carried effortlessly across the hushed space. "These women are not only my personal guests, but participants in this year's Innovation Leadership Panel." Richard Coleman stepped forward, confusion warring with his attempt to maintain composure. "Harrison, I don't understand. You're Malcolm Wilson, the civil rights attorney. We've met at the governor's charity gala 3 years ago." "Indeed we did," Richard Malcolm replied smoothly. "Though I recall you were considerably less attentive when I was introduced as a public interest lawyer rather than a billionaire industrialist." Coleman's face flushed.
This is impossible! I've known Harrison Davenport, or at least corresponded with him, for over a decade.
"You've corresponded with Harrison Davenport's office," Malcolm corrected. "A necessary arrangement that has served its purpose until now." Whispers erupted throughout the terminal as the implications settled. Vincent Perry looked as though he might faint, his earlier arrogance entirely evaporated. Malcolm turned to his daughters again, this time loudly enough for all to hear. "Dr. Wilson, Miss Wilson, I must apologize for your reception." It was meant to be a test for all retreat attendees, though not quite in this manner. Naomi found her voice first. A test? Dad, what are you talking about? And why is everyone calling you Harrison Davenport? Malcolm sighed, glancing at the confused faces surrounding them. Perhaps we should continue this conversation privately. My jet is waiting after all. Not until you explain what's happening. Jasmine insisted, doctor's authority evident in her tone. Right now. Malcolm nodded, acknowledging the reasonableness of their demand. Very well. He turned to address the entire terminal. Ladies and gentlemen, for those who haven't pieced it together yet, allow me to introduce myself properly. In public interest law circles, I'm known as Malcolm Wilson. In business and investment communities, I'm Harrison Davenport. The revelation landed like a thunderclap. Several guests audibly gasped. One woman actually dropped into a nearby chair, overcome. For 25 years, I've maintained these separate identities for a specific purpose. Malcolm Wilson fights discrimination openly in courtrooms and community centers. Harrison Davenport wields economic influence in boardrooms and investment meetings. Together, I have worked toward the same goal, creating a more equitable society through both legal and economic means. He gestured toward the sisters. What you've witnessed today, the differential treatment of these accomplished women, was meant to be part of my annual character assessment of potential partners and collaborators. Each year, I arrange for diverse candidates to arrive at this terminal. How they're treated by staff and fellow travelers tells me everything I need to know about a person's character when they believe no one important is watching. Richard Coleman had turned ashen. You planned this as some sort of moral litmus test. The test happens every year, though today's events escalated beyond my established parameters, Malcolm replied, his gaze hardening as he looked at Vincent Perry. The physical detention of guests was explicitly prohibited in my security protocols. Perry seemed to shrink under Malcolm's gaze. Sir, we were simply following standard procedure for unauthorized. My daughters, Malcolm interrupted, are never unauthorized on my aircraft. The word daughters triggered another wave of murmurs throughout the terminal. Jasmine stepped forward. Dad, you've been living a double life all this time. We're the daughters of Harrison Davenport. Malcolm's expression softened. You're the daughters of Malcolm Wilson, a man who loves you immensely and has worked tirelessly to create a world where your brilliance would be recognized on its own merit. The Davenport identity was always a means to an end. Naomi shook her head in disbelief. All those years struggling for funding, fighting to be taken seriously, you could have just written a check. And denied you the opportunity to succeed on your own terms, Malcolm countered gently. What lesson would that have taught you about perseverance, about your own capability? A sleek black woman in an impeccable suit approached from Malcolm's security detail, handing him a tablet. The documentation you requested, sir. Thank you, Diana. Malcolm accepted the tablet, then turned to Vincent Perry. As of this moment, ExecuJet Terminal is under new management. Davenport Industries acquired controlling interest 10 minutes ago following the discrimination incident against my family members. Perry's face crumpled. Sir, please, I was just following. Protocol, yes. You mentioned that. Malcolm swiped through the tablet. Your employment has been terminated effective immediately. Security will escort you from the premises once we've departed. He turned to Trevor, who stood at attention nearby. Officer Barnes, however, has demonstrated integrity under difficult circumstances. My office will be contacting you about a promotion to Terminal Security Director should you be interested. Trevor's eyes widened. Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Malcolm addressed the assembled crowd once more. For those still joining us at the retreat, your responses to today's events have been noted. Some of you will find your invited sessions adjusted accordingly. His gaze lingered pointedly on Richard Coleman, who looked away first. Malcolm checked his watch. Our new departure time is in 30 minutes. I suggest everyone board without further incident. He offered an arm to each of his daughters. "Shall we? We have much to discuss." As they walked toward the jet, Jasmine whispered, "The retreat's purpose isn't really innovation, is it?" Malcolm smiled slightly. "Innovation is certainly part of it, but its primary purpose has always been identifying allies and dismantling systemic inequities across industries. Some attend, believing it's merely a networking opportunity. They're usually quite surprised by the actual agenda." Outside on the tarmac, standing before the luxurious private jet, now awaiting their boarding, Naomi asked the question foremost in both sisters' minds. Why reveal your identity now, after all these years? Malcolm looked between his daughter's pride evident in his expression. "Because you're both finally ready to understand the full scope of our family's purpose, and because some battles cannot be won from the shadows." Behind them, the terminal had erupted into chaos, as privilege and prejudice collided with unexpected consequences. Ahead, the jet's stairs waited to carry them toward a revelation 25 years in the making. The interior of the private jet defied every expectation of luxury. Rather than the ostentatious display of wealth one might anticipate, the cabin featured understated elegance, comfortable but purposeful, like a well-appointed mobile office. The walls displayed framed photographs of historically significant civil rights moments, alongside breakthrough innovations in medicine and technology. Malcolm directed his daughters to a circular seating arrangement midway through the cabin, while the other retreat attendees filed silently aboard, most avoiding eye contact with the Wilson family. "Privacy shields," Malcolm instructed as they settled in. Immediately, frosted glass partitions rose from the cabin floor, creating a soundproof enclosure around their seating area. "We have approximately 90 minutes before landing. That should be enough time to answer your most pressing questions." Jasmine and Naomi exchanged glances, decades of sisterly communication condensed into a single look. Jasmine spoke first. "Let's start with the obvious. You're Harrison Davenport." "Yes and no," Malcolm replied, loosening his tie slightly. "Harrison Davenport exists primarily as a legal entity, a carefully constructed identity with all the necessary documentation. But every decision, every investment, every business meeting has been me, Malcolm Wilson, operating behind a carefully maintained veil of privacy." "How is that even possible?" Naomi pressed. "Davenport Industries employs thousands of people. Someone would have noticed." Malcolm smiled slightly. "Most billionaires are remarkably reclusive. Howard Hughes, Elon Musk. During certain periods, people accept eccentricity from the ultra-wealthy. Harrison Davenport conducts business primarily through video conferences, with carefully controlled lighting, written correspondence, and a select group of trusted representatives who understand the dual identity arrangement." "But why?" Jasmine leaned forward. "Why create this elaborate alter ego in the first place?" Malcolm's expression grew serious. "Because I learned early in my career that justice has two battlefronts, the public arena of law and the shadow realm of economic influence. As Malcolm Wilson, I could fight discriminatory practices in courtrooms, but certain doors remained firmly closed to me no matter my legal successes." He gestured toward the window where clouds drifted past. "The year you were born, Jasmine, I won a landmark discrimination case against Whitehall Financial. The verdict was significant front-page news. 2 weeks later, I attempted to secure financing for a community development project in a historically black neighborhood. Despite impeccable credentials and the recent legal victory, every bank denied the application. Because you were a black man trying to develop a black neighborhood," Naomi concluded. "Precisely." Malcolm nodded. That same month, a white colleague with inferior credentials received approval for a nearly identical proposal in a different neighborhood. The message was clear. Legal victories alone wouldn't change the economic systems perpetuating inequality. "So you created Harrison Davenport," Jasmine said slowly. "A name with no racial identity attached." "Initially, yes. Harrison Davenport began as a legal entity to purchase property and secure financing. I hired a white representative for in-person meetings. As the investment succeeded, Davenport gained credibility. One property became 10. 10 became a development company, which expanded into healthcare technology education. All this time, Naomi whispered, while raising us alone after Mom died, "You were secretly building an empire." A shadow crossed Malcolm's face at the mention of their mother. Losing Eleanor changed everything. He paused, collecting himself. She was my moral compass, my partner in every sense. Her death wasn't just a personal tragedy, it became the catalyst for expanding the Davenport mission. "What do you mean?" Jasmine asked. Malcolm met his daughter's gaze directly. "Your mother didn't die from surgical complications, Jasmine. She died from medical racism." The words landed like physical blows. Jasmine recoiled slightly. "What?" Eleanor's procedure was routine. Her surgeon was highly recommended for white patients. What we didn't know then was that his outcomes for black patients were significantly worse. He spent less time on their cases, dismissed their pain reports, prescribed fewer follow-up treatments. Malcolm pulled a tablet from his briefcase, bringing up a document. "After she died, I commissioned a private statistical analysis of his patient outcomes. Black patients under his care were 3 times more likely to experience complications than white patients with identical conditions." "That's why you encouraged me toward medicine," Jasmine realized, her voice barely audible. "I encouraged you to follow your passion," Malcolm corrected gently. "But yes, watching your mother's treatment influenced my perspective on healthcare disparities. Just as watching investors dismiss Naomi's technological innovations, despite superior metrics, influenced my investment strategies." Naomi frowned. "Wait, some of my early funding came through obscure venture capital firms. Was that?" "Davenport subsidiaries. Yes, though always, as minority investors, to ensure your success remained legitimately your own. The same with your research grants, Jasmine. I opened doors, but you both walked through them on your own merit." The sisters sat in stunned silence, processing the revelations. Outside their privacy shield, flight attendants moved through the cabin, serving the other passengers who cast curious glances toward the secluded family conversation. "All those times you were traveling for cases," Jasmine began. "Often Davenport business," Malcolm confirmed. "The dual identity allowed me to move in spaces that would have otherwise been inaccessible to Malcolm Wilson, civil rights attorney." "The retreat," Naomi said suddenly. "It's not really about innovation networking, is it?" Malcolm smiled. "Innovation is certainly discussed, but the retreat's true purpose is identifying and cultivating allies across industries who are committed to dismantling systemic inequities. Some guests arrive believing it's merely a networking opportunity with a reclusive billionaire. They're usually quite surprised by the actual agenda, and sometimes weeded out through tests like today's." Jasmine added, understanding dawning. "Exactly. We intentionally invite diverse candidates and observe how established guests and staff interact with them. Those who demonstrate bias rarely receive second invitations, though this year's terminal incident was far more severe than our standard assessments." A thought occurred to Naomi. "Richard Coleman. He's been working with Davenport Industries for years, yet he was openly discriminatory toward us." Malcolm's expression hardened. "Coleman's relationship with my company ends today. He's been skating on thin ice for some time. Previous incidents were more subtle, but today removed all doubt about his character." "He's on this flight," Jasmine pointed out. "Yes, and he'll witness the consequences of his actions at tomorrow morning's opening session when his removal from several boards is announced." Malcolm checked his watch. "Which brings us to the immediate question, what happens now?" The sisters exchanged glances again. "What do you mean?" Naomi asked. "Now that you know the truth about our family's mission and resources, you have decisions to make. You can continue as you have been, brilliant women succeeding on your own terms. or you can choose to join the broader Davenport initiative more directly. Either way, the choice must be yours. This is... Jasmine shook her head. It's overwhelming. I understand. Malcolm's voice softened. I've had 25 years to develop this dual existence. You've had 20 minutes. Take whatever time you need. Comment, night, comment, night, 19th, 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 19 time. Naomi leaned back in her seat, mind racing. I just can't believe you maintained this secret our entire lives. No hints, no slips. There were hints, Malcolm countered. The summer internship program that happened to accept you both. The research grant that came through just when your project faced cancellation, Jasmine. The investor who appeared when you were down to your last month of operating capital, Naomi. Recognition flickered across their faces as they recalled these seemingly fortuitous events. You were testing us, Jasmine realized, seeing if we would succeed without direct advantage. I was supporting you while honoring your independence, Malcolm corrected. There's a difference. The privacy shield dimmed slightly, indicating their approach to the island. Below azure waters surrounded a lush private retreat, Davenport's legendary innovation sanctuary. We're nearly there, Malcolm noted. One last thing before we land. While the choice to join the Davenport mission actively is yours alone, I do need your participation in this week's retreat. Today's terminal incident creates a perfect teaching moment for our guests. Teaching moment, Naomi repeated. A first-hand demonstration of how privilege and bias operate in supposedly elite spaces. Malcolm's expression was resolute. Richard Coleman and his colleagues just provided us with a textbook case study in discrimination, complete with witnesses and recordings. Their education begins tomorrow. As the jet began its descent, Jasmine looked out at the island below a paradise, concealing what she now realized was the headquarters of a decades-long mission to transform American power structures from within. You've been playing the long game, she said quietly. Justice always requires the long game, Malcolm replied. Change doesn't happen overnight, but rather through thousands of strategic moves across years of concentrated effort. The landing gear deployed with a mechanical whir. Malcolm straightened his tie once again, becoming the imposing figure who would silence the entire terminal with his presence. Welcome to Seraphim Island, he said as the wheels touched down on the private runway. The real work begins now. Morning sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows in Seraphim Island's Grand Conference Center. 75 of the nation's most influential leaders in business, medicine, technology, and politics sat in concentric semicircles facing a stage where Malcolm Wilson, now openly acknowledged as Harrison Davenport, stood behind a podium. The atmosphere crackled with tension. Since their arrival yesterday afternoon, rumors had spread throughout the retreat about the terminal incident and the shocking revelation of Davenport's true identity. Guests had spent the evening in whispered conversations speculating about what this meant for their relationships with Davenport Industries and their own carefully cultivated public images. Good morning, Malcolm began, his voice commanding immediate silence. For 25 years, I've welcomed guests to this retreat under the name Harrison Davenport, while concealing my identity as Malcolm Wilson. Today, that division ends, and with it, our traditional opening pleasantries. Behind him, a massive screen illuminated, displaying security footage from the private terminal. The assembled guests watched in growing discomfort as the discrimination against Jasmine and Naomi played out in high definition. Their credentials questioned, their professionalism, dismissed their bodies, ultimately, physically restrained. What you're witnessing, Malcolm continued as the footage played, was not an isolated incident, but rather a controlled demonstration of the biases that persist in spaces presumed to be post-racial. The only variable that exceeded our parameters was the physical detention of my daughters, which was never authorized. The screen split to show individual reactions from various guests at the terminal, some looking uncomfortable but remaining silent, others actively participating in the discrimination, a few attempting half-hearted interventions. For 24 years, this retreat has begun, with each of you receiving detailed portfolios on your fellow attendees. This year, you'll receive something different, a comprehensive analysis of your response to yesterday's incident, along with its implications for our continued professional relationship. Assistants moved through the room, distributing sealed folders to each guest. Richard Coleman's face had turned an alarming shade of red as he clutched his unopened envelope. Before you review these assessments, I want to clarify something, Malcolm continued. This retreat has never been primarily about innovation networking, though that has been a productive byproduct. Its true purpose from its inception has been identifying and cultivating allies across industries who demonstrate genuine commitment to dismantling systemic inequities. Murmurs rippled through the audience as this revelation settled. Some of you were invited specifically to be tested, others to be cultivated as allies. All of you have been evaluated continuously during your association with Davenport Industries through carefully designed scenarios like yesterday's terminal incident. The screen changed to display statistical data bar graphs showing disparities in how guests and business partners treated employees of different races, genders, and backgrounds. This morning, I'm joined by my daughters who will help contextualize yesterday's events from their perspectives as Black women navigating white-dominated spaces. Jasmine and Naomi entered from stage left, both dressed in professional attire that commanded respect. They took positions on either side of their father, Dr. Jasmine Wilson, head of neurosurgical innovation at Atlanta Memorial, and pioneer of neural regeneration techniques that have restored motor function to 17 previously paralyzed patients. Jasmine nodded in acknowledgement as her credentials and accomplishments appeared on screen. And Naomi Wilson, founder and CEO of Equitech Solutions, whose accessibility algorithms have revolutionized digital inclusion and outperformed industry standards by 43% in independent testing. Naomi stepped forward as her professional biography appeared alongside her sisters. Yesterday, Jasmine began. Many of you witnessed our treatment at the terminal. Some participated actively in our humiliation. Others watched silently. A few showed discomfort but took no meaningful action. What you may not realize, Naomi continued, is that these experiences aren't anomalies for us. They represent our daily reality as Black women in professional spaces, constant questioning of our credentials, assumptions about our role or position, explicit and implicit messages that we don't belong. The screen behind them shifted to security footage, focusing specifically on Richard Coleman's interactions at the terminal, his dismissive comments, his assumptions about the sisters being diversity hires, or probably the help. Coleman half rose from his seat. This is outrageous. You're deliberately taking those comments out of context to what Richard Malcolm interrupted calmly. To accurately demonstrate your pattern of behavior, this wasn't an isolated incident. The screen split to show multiple clips of Coleman making similar remarks at previous events, clearly unaware he was being recorded. Your envelope contains documentation of 27 similar incidents during your association with Davenport Industries, despite multiple opportunities for growth and correction. Coleman sank back into his seat, visibly deflating. Open your assessments, please, Malcolm instructed the room. The sound of tearing paper filled the space as guests revealed their personalized evaluations. Reactions varied dramatically. Some faces registered shock, others relief. Many displayed shame or defensiveness. You'll note that each assessment concludes with one of three outcomes, Malcolm explained. Continued partnership with modified terms, probationary status, pending demonstrated improvement, or immediate termination of our professional relationship. He fixed his gaze on Coleman. Richard, as Davenport's primary investment partner for the past decade, you've been entrusted with significant influence. Your assessment concludes with immediate termination Effective this morning, transportation has been arranged to return you to the mainland within the hour." Coleman surged to his feet, face contorted with rage. "You can't do this. Your contracts with Davenport Industries contain morality clauses that you've repeatedly violated." Malcolm replied evenly. Section 12, paragraph 4, specifically addresses discriminatory behavior. Additionally, as of 6 a.m. today, you have been removed from the boards of 7 companies where Davenport holds controlling interest. Your resignation announcements cite personal reasons rather than publicly disclosing the actual cause, which was my daughter's preference. Coleman wasn't the only one facing consequences. Throughout the room, several other guests received similar news. A tech CEO known for fostering toxic workplace cultures. A hospital administrator with troubling patterns in hiring decisions. A venture capitalist whose funding disproportionately excluded minority founders. For those receiving termination notices, Naomi added, "This isn't punitive, but protective. The evidence in your files represents patterns, not isolated mistakes. You've had opportunities to grow and chosen not to." And for those on probationary status, Jasmine continued, "This retreat offers a genuine opportunity for transformation. We've designed specialized tracks addressing unconscious bias, equity-centered leadership, and practical accountability systems." As the implications of these announcements rippled through the room, Trevor, the security guard who had shown compassion at the terminal, entered from a side door. He had traded his guard uniform for a business suit and now carried himself with new confidence. "Some of you may recognize Officer Trevor Barnes from yesterday's incident," Malcolm said, beckoning him forward. Trevor demonstrated integrity in a challenging situation, providing small kindnesses to my daughters despite pressure from his superiors. This morning, he accepted the position of Executive Director for our new Terminal Equity Initiative. Trevor stepped to the microphone. "Thank you, Mr. Wilson. As someone who has witnessed discrimination from inside the security industry, I'm honored to lead this initiative. Our first project launches today a complete overhaul of private aviation security protocols, beginning with ExecuJet Terminal." As Trevor outlined the initiative, Vincent Perry's image appeared on screen, the terminal manager who had authorized the sisters' detention. "Mr. Perry declined our offer of remedial training," Trevor explained. "However, his actions yesterday have been documented in a case study now being incorporated into security training nationwide." Sometimes negative examples provide powerful learning opportunities. Malcolm returned to the podium. "This brings us to the fundamental question that has driven my work for 25 years. How do we create lasting change in systems designed to resist it?" The screen displayed a complex organizational chart showing Davenport Industries' numerous subsidiaries, investments, and initiatives, all strategically positioned to influence key sectors. Change requires both external pressure and internal transformation. Malcolm continued, "As Malcolm Wilson, I've applied external pressure through legal challenges to discriminatory systems. As Harrison Davenport, I've worked to transform those systems from within by leveraging economic influence." Jasmine stepped forward. "In healthcare, this has meant investing in diverse medical research, funding scholarships for underrepresented students, and developing equity metrics for patient outcomes. In technology," Naomi added, "it's meant creating inclusive design standards, supporting minority-owned startups, and embedding accessibility as a core product requirement rather than an afterthought." Malcolm surveyed the room, where the atmosphere had transformed from defensive tension to somber reflection. "This retreat marks a new chapter. With my identity now public, Davenport Industries will advocate openly for what we've long supported privately. Some of you will join us in this more transparent mission. Others will depart today. All of you will be remembered for your choices in this moment." As if on cue, Richard Coleman stood abruptly and stormed toward the exit, followed by a handful of others whose assessments had clearly ended their relationship with Davenport. When the door closed behind them, Malcolm addressed those who remained. For those staying, your revised retreat schedules reflect specialized tracks based on your assessments. Your participation isn't merely about professional development, it's about becoming architects of a more equitable future. The screen displayed a final slide, a photograph of Eleanor Wilson, the sister's mother, smiling radiantly in a garden. 25 years ago, I lost my wife to medical racism, Malcolm said, his voice softening for the first time. I vowed then that her death would catalyze transformation. Today, as my daughters join me in leading this mission, I believe we're closer than ever to fulfilling that promise. As the morning session concluded, the remaining guests rose in a standing ovation, not merely for the Wilson family's revelation, but for the opportunity to participate in something larger than individual success. The reckoning had begun, and with it the possibility of genuine transformation. Jasmine stood alone on the eastern cliffs of Seraphim Island, watching waves crash against volcanic rock 40 feet below. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the rugged landscape, much like the revelations of the past 24 hours had cast shadows across her understanding of her family's history. The morning's confrontational session had given way to specialized workshops for the remaining retreat attendees. While Naomi led a discussion on equity-centered design thinking, Jasmine had excused herself, needing space to process everything she'd learned. I thought I'd find you here, Naomi's voice came from behind her. Dad said you used to hide in high places when you were upset as a kid. Jasmine didn't turn around. I'm not upset. I'm recalibrating. Naomi joined her at the cliff's edge. For several minutes, the sisters stood in silence, watching seabirds wheel against the cloudless sky. Did you know? Jasmine finally asked. Did you ever suspect? About Dad, no. Naomi shook her head. Though looking back, there were signs. The mysterious phone calls. The international cases that never seemed to appear in legal databases. The way certain doors opened for us at precisely the right moments. That's what bothers me most, Jasmine admitted. All those years struggling to be taken seriously, fighting for research, funding, enduring dismissive comments from colleagues and Dad, could have made it all disappear with a single phone call. But would we be the same people? If he had Naomi challenged, would your research be as groundbreaking if you hadn't had to fight for every resource? Would my company have developed such innovative solutions if investors had lined up from day one? Jasmine sighed. That's his justification too. It feels manipulative, like we were lab rats in some elaborate social experiment, or like we were his daughters, and he wanted us to develop resilience while still providing a safety net. Behind them, footsteps approached on the rocky path. Both sisters turned to see their father, his normally impeccable suit replaced by casual linen pants and a simple button-down shirt. In this relaxed attire, he looked more like the father they'd grown up with than the imposing figure who had commanded the conference room that morning. Mind if I join you? Malcolm asked, stopping a respectful distance away. Naomi nodded, but Jasmine turned back toward the ocean, her posture stiffening slightly. Malcolm approached carefully. I imagine you both have questions beyond what we covered on the flight. Just one, Jasmine said, still facing the water. Was anything real, or was our entire childhood just part of your grand social justice strategy? The hurt in her voice was unmistakable. Malcolm winced. Everything about our family was real, Jasmine. My love for you both, my pride in your accomplishments, the values we shared. The only fiction was the limitation of our resources. And Mom Jasmine turned to face him, now eyes glistening. Did she know about Harrison Davenport? She knew everything, Malcolm confirmed softly. Eleanor was my partner in creating the Davenport identity. Her background in finance helped establish the initial investment structures. When we married, we agreed to raise any children we might have, without the advantages of wealth, at least until they were established in their own right. So Mom chose this deception too? Naomi asked, surprised. She called it strategic concealment, rather than deception. Malcolm smiled sadly. Eleanor believed that true character develops through overcoming challenges, not avoiding them. After we lost her, he paused, looking out over the ocean. Both sisters recognized the grief that still shadowed his features when speaking of their mother. After we lost her, I almost abandoned the entire Davenport project, nearly liquidated everything to focus solely on raising you two. But then I received her medical records. The evidence of medical racism, Jasmine said quietly. Malcolm nodded. The surgeon spent 17 minutes on your mother's procedure. For white patients with identical conditions, his average was 29 minutes. He prescribed lower dosages of pain medication despite her reported discomfort. When complications developed, he dismissed them as anxiety until it was too late. He pulled a weathered leather wallet from his pocket, removing a faded photograph of their mother. Eleanor's death transformed the Davenport mission from economic equity to something more comprehensive. In her memory, I expanded into healthcare, education, criminal justice, reform, all systems where racial disparities persist, despite legal prohibitions against discrimination. The terminal incident, Naomi realized, that wasn't just a test for the other guests. It was personal for you, because of Mom. Every discrimination incident is personal, Malcolm replied. But yes, seeing you both detained brought back memories of waiting in hospital corridors while administrators questioned our insurance status despite our coverage, of watching Eleanor's concerns dismissed until it was too late. His voice hardened. I never intended for security to physically detain you. That security protocol override came directly from Richard Coleman, which is why his termination was non-negotiable. Jasmine moved away from the cliff edge, pacing in a tight circle. So what happens now? You've revealed your identity. The Davenport empire is exposed. Do we just join the family business? That decision remains entirely yours, Malcolm assured her. You've both built remarkable careers on your own merit. Nothing about yesterday's revelation changes that. Doesn't it though? Jasmine challenged. Once word spreads that we're Davenport's daughters, everyone will attribute our success to nepotism rather than ability. Perhaps initially, Malcolm acknowledged, but your accomplishments speak for themselves. 17 paralyzed patients who can now move independently because of your research, Jasmine. Over 300,000 people with disabilities who can navigate digital spaces thanks to your software, Naomi. Those achievements can't be dismissed as nepotism. The three Wilsons fell silent, the only sound, the rhythmic crashing of waves against rock. A flock of seabirds soared overhead their formations, shifting and realigning with graceful precision. I visited Mom's grave before we left Atlanta, Naomi said suddenly. I always do before big career moments. I tell her what I'm working on seeking. I don't know, some kind of maternal guidance I barely remember. Malcolm's expression softened. Eleanor would be extraordinarily proud of you both. Would she? Jasmine asked. Or would she be disappointed that I've spent my career working within a healthcare system that killed her instead of trying to transform it from the outside? She would recognize that transformation requires both approaches, Malcolm replied. External pressure and internal change. Just as our family has embodied with Malcolm Wilson challenging systems publicly while Harrison Davenport reshapes them from within. He reached into his pocket and withdrew 2 small velvet boxes, offering one to each daughter. What's this? Naomi asked, accepting hers cautiously. A choice, Malcolm answered, not an obligation. The sisters exchanged glances before opening their boxes simultaneously. Each contained an elegant gold pin bearing the Davenport Industries logo, the same emblem that had adorned their retreat invitations. Eleanor designed this insignia, Malcolm explained. The intertwined D forms a complete circle representing our belief that true progress requires connecting innovation with justice. These pins identify the senior leadership of Davenport Industries. I've never offered them to anyone outside myself until now. You want us to help lead the company, Jasmine stated, studying the pin without touching it. I want you to consider how your individual missions might expand through additional resources, Malcolm corrected. Your neurosurgical innovations saving more lives. Your accessibility technology reaching more users. Both potentially transforming their respective industries from within, as Davenport has always intended. Naomi removed her pin, examining it in the sunlight. What exactly would joining the Davenport leadership mean, practically speaking? Initially, completing this retreat with a new understanding of its purpose, engaging with attendees not just as accomplished professionals, but as potential architects of systemic change. Beyond that, the scope of your involvement would be determined by your own interests and comfort level. Jasmine still hadn't touched her pin, and if we decline, then you return to your existing careers with my full support, plus the knowledge that additional resources are available should you ever need them. Malcolm's voice remained steady. This is an invitation, not an ultimatum. Your independence remains paramount regardless of your decision. A hotel staff member appeared on the path, apologetically informing Malcolm that his presence was requested for the afternoon session. He nodded acknowledgement before turning back to his daughters. Take whatever time you need, he said softly. The retreat continues for 4 more days. Your decision can wait. After their father departed, the sisters returned to the cliff's edge. Naomi had pocketed her pin, while Jasmine's box remained unopened in her hand. What are you thinking? Naomi asked finally. I'm thinking about my patients, Jasmine replied. About how many more I could help with Davenport resources behind my research. And about Mom, how different her outcome might have been with a doctor who recognized her humanity rather than seeing her through the lens of racial bias. She opened the box again, finally lifting the pin. But I'm also thinking about the patients I'd never see if I shifted to a corporate role. The residents I wouldn't train. The hands-on work that gives my research meaning. It doesn't have to be either divided by or Naomi suggested. Dad maintained 2 complete professional identities for 25 years. Surely we could balance clinical work with strategic influence. Jasmine considered this. What about you, Equitech? Is your baby? Would you really merge it with Davenport Industries? I'm thinking of it differently, Naomi said. Not merging, but expanding. My company already makes digital spaces more accessible. With Davenport's reach, we could establish new industry standards. Make accessibility non-negotiable rather than an afterthought. As the afternoon sun began its descent toward the horizon, the sisters continued their discussion, weighing personal ambitions against broader impact, independence against influence, individual careers against their family's deaths. Multi-generational mission. No final decision was reached that afternoon on the cliffs. Instead, something more significant occurred. A shift in perspective that transformed their understanding of their past and opened new possibilities for their future. Whether they ultimately accepted formal roles within Davenport Industries or chose to collaborate more selectively, the sisters recognized that they were now consciously part of something larger than themselves, a legacy of resistance and reconstruction begun by their parents and now entrusted to their generation. Whatever we decide, Jasmine said, as they finally turned back toward the retreat center, we decide together. Naomi nodded, linking arms with her sister. Together, just like always. 1 year later, the ExecuJet terminal bore little resemblance to the site of discrimination that had catalyzed the Wilson family's public reunion. The space had been completely redesigned, not just aesthetically, but functionally and philosophically. Where uniformed attendants had once judged passengers based on appearance, a diverse team now welcomed travelers using a revolutionary check-in system that prioritized reservation data over subjective assessments. The terminal's walls featured powerful photography documenting America's civil rights journey alongside digital installations showcasing innovation across cultures. The central seating area, once segmented to reinforce hierarchy, now encouraged conversation between travelers from different backgrounds. At the heart of this transformation stood Jasmine and Naomi Wilson, awaiting the arrival of a specific flight. Both sisters had evolved their professional appearances in subtle ways that bridged their individual identities with their newly public roles. Jasmine's medical scrubs were visible beneath a tailored blazer bearing a small Davenport pin. Naomi's tech-casual attire included ethically sourced materials from companies within the Davenport investment portfolio. Nervous Naomi asked, checking the flight tracker on her tablet. A little Jasmine admitted, "It's one thing to plan transformation. It's another to witness whether it actually takes root." The terminal doors opened as Trevor Barnes entered, now carrying himself with the confident authority of his executive position. The former security guard had thrived as director of the Terminal Equity Initiative, implementing systemic changes that had already been adopted by 17 other private aviation facilities nationwide. Everything set for the demonstration, Trevor confirmed, joining them at the observation window. The Johannesburg flight lands in 10 minutes. Chicago and Mumbai arrive within the hour. Perfect timing for the press conference, Naomi noted. "How are our special guests doing?" Trevor's expression shifted to carefully maintain neutrality. "Mr. Coleman arrived 30 minutes ago. He's waiting in the reception area as requested, along with the other participants." Richard Coleman had undergone his own transformation over the past year, though not the one he might have chosen. After his very public dismissal from Davenport's retreat, his reputation had suffered significant damage. Investment partners questioned his judgment. Board positions evaporated. His social capital among the elite had plummeted alongside his financial holdings. 6 months into this professional freefall, he had received an unexpected call from Naomi Wilson. The offer she presented wasn't reinstatement, but redemption, a specially designed position implementing diversity initiatives across the aviation industry, working directly under her supervision at Equitech Solutions, now openly acknowledged as a Davenport subsidiary. Coleman's initial refusal had been predictable. His eventual acceptance came only after every other career path had closed. Pride had given way to pragmatism, then gradually to something resembling genuine reflection. "Is Dad's flight on schedule?" Jasmine asked, scanning arrivals. Trevor nodded. "Just entered final approach." Malcolm requested the standard arrival protocol, no special treatment. The sisters exchanged knowing smiles. Despite his revealed identity, their father insisted on being treated like any other passenger, using these experiences as ongoing monitoring of the terminal's transformation. "This facility has come a long way," Naomi observed, watching diverse travelers move through security with dignity and tact. "Hard to believe it's the same place where we were detained a year ago." The physical space was the easy part, Trevor noted. Changing the culture, the protocols, the underlying assumptions, that's been the real challenge. Jasmine nodded in agreement. Same as in medicine. Renovating a hospital is simpler than transforming how healthcare decisions are made. But we're seeing progress there too. The past year had indeed brought remarkable changes across multiple sectors where Davenport influence operated. Jasmine had established the Eleanor Wilson Medical Equity Institute, implementing bias awareness training and outcome accountability systems across 17 major hospital networks. Her neural regeneration techniques had been made available through a revolutionary licensing model that ensured accessibility regardless of patients' economic status. Naomi had expanded Equitech's mission beyond software accessibility to comprehensive inclusivity standards, now adopted by tech giants previously resistant to change. Her most significant achievement had been the Digital Equity Certification Program, which established measurable criteria for technology accessibility across platforms. Malcolm Wilson, no longer using the Harrison Davenport pseudonym, had focused on leveraging his now public dual identity to maximize impact. Congressional testimony about his experiences operating as both a black attorney and a presumed white billionaire had catalyzed legislative reforms in banking, housing, and educational funding. His revelation had transformed him from a respected civil rights attorney into a uniquely powerful voice for systemic change, bridging divides between grassroots activism and institutional power. Outside the terminal windows, a sleek private jet touched down on the runway, taxiing gracefully toward the reception area. "Dad's here," Jasmine noted, watching the aircraft approach. "Right on schedule for the press conference." As the sisters moved toward the arrival gate, Naomi glanced at Trevor. "Is everything prepared for the demonstration?" "All set," he confirmed. "The blind evaluation protocol is active for all incoming flights today. Staff have no advance information about passenger identities until after initial processing." This protocol, now known industry-wide as the Wilson method, had revolutionized how private aviation handled client verification. Passenger credentials were assessed through secure digital channels before physical arrival, with terminal staff receiving only confirmation codes rather than personal details that might trigger bias. The jet door opened, and Malcolm Wilson descended the steps with characteristic dignity. At 63, he carried himself with the same commanding presence that had silenced the terminal a year earlier, though his expression softened immediately upon seeing his daughters. "Right on time," he commented, embracing them both. "How's our demonstration progressing?" 3 international flights arriving within the hour, Jasmine explained. Johannesburg, Chicago, Mumbai, all using the blind evaluation protocol with passengers of varying backgrounds. "And our special participant?" Malcolm asked, his tone measured. Waiting in the reception area, Naomi confirmed. "Coleman's been surprisingly cooperative, all things considered." Malcolm nodded thoughtfully. "Necessity often precedes enlightenment. Speaking of which," he gestured toward the terminal entrance where a group of journalists was gathering for the scheduled press conference. Today marked the official unveiling of the Terminal Equity Initiative's results, 1 year of data demonstrating measurable improvements in passenger experience across demographic categories. "Before we begin," Malcolm said quietly, "I want to acknowledge how proud your mother would be of what you've both accomplished this year. This transformation extends far beyond a single terminal or retreat. Indeed, the sisters' decision following last year's retreat had evolved into something neither had initially imagined. Rather than choosing between their established careers and Davenport leadership roles, they had created a third path, integrating their professional expertise with strategic influence to effect change at both individual and systemic levels. Jasmine had maintained her surgical practice 3 days weekly while directing the Eleanor Wilson Medical Equity Institute the remaining time. This balance allowed her to continue treating patients personally, while simultaneously transforming how medical institutions addressed racial disparities in care. Naomi had expanded Equitech's mission beyond her original vision, leveraging Davenport resources to establish inclusivity as a competitive advantage rather than a compliance burden for technology companies. Her digital equity certification had become the industry's gold standard, with corporations actively competing to achieve higher ratings. The terminal's main doors opened, revealing Richard Coleman waiting with several other executives who had similarly undergone redemptive reassignment following last year's revelations. Their expressions ranged from resigned acceptance to genuine engagement with the day's demonstration. Mr. Coleman Malcolm acknowledged with professional courtesy, "Thank you for participating today." Coleman nodded stiffly. "Miss Wilson's quarterly assessment indicated my presence was required." "Not required," Naomi corrected. "Recommended for your professional development." Today's demonstration provides valuable perspective on how unconscious bias affects everyday experiences. Before Coleman could respond, Trevor approached with an update. "All flights are proceeding on schedule. Johannesburg passengers are beginning arrival verification now." The group moved to an observation area with one-way glass, allowing them to witness the terminal's operations without influencing staff behavior. On screens above, real-time data displayed processing times and satisfaction metrics for arriving passengers categorized by demographic factors but not identified individually. 1 year ago, in this very terminal, Malcolm began addressing the assembled observers. My daughters experienced discrimination that might have remained invisible without their documentation. Today, you'll witness how systematic changes to protocols, not just personnel, transform outcomes. Over the next hour, passengers from 3 international flights move through the terminal with remarkably consistent experiences, regardless of appearance, accent, or nationality. The blind evaluation protocol ensured each traveler received identical verification processes, with staff behavior monitored through both technical metrics and passenger feedback. For Richard Coleman, watching this demonstration produced visible discomfort, particularly when a black family receiving VIP treatment was revealed to be Johannesburg banking executives he had previously dismissed as unlikely prospects for his investment firm. The data speaks for itself, Jasmine noted as they reviewed the statistics following all 3 flights. Average processing time variance between white passengers and passengers of color has decreased from 18 minutes to under 2 minutes. Satisfaction ratings show no significant variation across demographics. Impressive metrics, Coleman acknowledged reluctantly. Though implementing similar protocols across all terminals would require substantial investment, an investment that pays significant returns, Malcolm countered. Inclusive systems aren't just morally right, they're economically efficient. Discrimination wastes human potential, alienates valuable clients, and creates legal liability. As they prepared for the press conference, Trevor presented Coleman with a tablet displaying his own data from the past year, a comprehensive assessment of his progress through Naomi's redemption program. Your improvement metrics are notable, Trevor pointed out. Initial resistance has given way to measurable growth, particularly in recognizing systemic patterns rather than focusing on individual intentions. Coleman studied the assessment with unexpected attention. I still maintain some of my methodology was misinterpreted. Perhaps, Naomi allowed. But today you have an opportunity to demonstrate your evolution publicly. Your statement about transforming aviation protocols is scheduled third after Dad and Jasmine. As journalists assembled in the terminal's conference center, Malcolm took a moment alone with his daughters before taking the stage. 1 year ago, we stood in this terminal at a crossroads, he said quietly. Today, we demonstrate that transformation isn't just possible, it's happening. Not through grand gestures alone, but through persistent strategic pressure from both outside institutions and within them. The press conference proceeded with remarkable impact. Malcolm outlining the Terminal Equity Initiative's origin and mission, Jasmine presenting medical data, demonstrating how standardized protocols reduced bias in healthcare settings. And then most surprisingly, Richard Coleman delivering a surprisingly reflective account of his own transformation from skeptic to advocate. I won't pretend my journey began voluntarily, Coleman admitted to the assembled media. But data doesn't lie. When equity protocols are properly implemented, efficiency improves, client satisfaction increases, and legal liability decreases. What began as mandatory redemption has become sound business strategy. Following the formal presentations, Jasmine found herself approached by a young black medical student who had attended as part of a university delegation. Dr. Wilson, your neural regeneration research inspired me to pursue neurosurgery, the young woman explained earnestly. But seeing you leverage that expertise to transform medical systems, that's shown me a path I never imagined possible. Similar conversations occurred throughout the terminal. As the event concluded, Naomi mentoring young tech entrepreneurs, Trevor sharing expertise with security professionals, implementing bias reduction protocols, Malcolm advising. attorneys on combining legal challenges with economic strategies. As evening approached and the last guests departed, the Wilson family gathered in a quiet corner of the terminal that had been transformed from a site of discrimination into a center for systemic change. One year, Naomi reflected. It feels both longer and shorter somehow. Transformation is like that, Malcolm smiled. Seemingly impossible until it happens, then seemingly inevitable in retrospect. Jasmine gazed out at the runway where aircraft continued arriving and departing, with passengers experiencing consistent, dignified treatment regardless of appearance or background. Mom would have loved seeing this, she said softly. Not just the physical changes, but the ripple effects across industries. Malcolm nodded, his expression both proud and wistful. Eleanor always said true justice requires both immediate intervention and long-term transformation. You've both embodied that principle beyond anything we could have imagined. As twilight fell, the terminal's lighting system activated automatically, illuminating a subtle pattern in the floor tiles visible only at certain angles. The intertwined D of the Davenport logo transformed into a complete circle that represented their family's mission, connecting innovation with justice, external pressure with internal change, individual excellence with collective transformation. Outside, a sleek private jet awaited to return them to Seraphim Island, where the second annual Davenport Transformation Retreat would begin tomorrow, this time with participants fully aware of its purpose from the outset. The passenger manifest included corporate leaders seeking guidance on equity initiatives, medical administrators implementing bias reduction protocols, and even former skeptics like Richard Coleman, who had experienced firsthand the site-sensitive reductions. Benefits of systematic change. The Wilson legacy had evolved from concealment to revelation, from individual success to collective transformation. And as they boarded the aircraft together, a neurosurgeon, a tech innovator, and the man who had operated as both civil rights attorney and corporate titan, they carried forward Eleanor's vision of justice, requiring both immediate intervention and systems change, external pressure and internal transformation. Ready for tomorrow? Malcolm asked, as the jet prepared for takeoff. Jasmine and Naomi exchanged glances, their matched Davenport pins catching the last light of day. Ready, they confirmed in unison. As the aircraft ascended towards Seraphim Island, the terminal below stood as a visible testament to their family's mission, not merely a symbol of what had been accomplished, but a working model of what remained possible when justice and proper innovation united with purpose. What would you do if you discovered someone in your family had been living a double life for a noble cause? Would you feel betrayed by the deception or inspired by their commitment to change? Comment below with your thoughts. If this story of justice, identity, and transformation resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe for more powerful narratives that challenge our understanding of race and privilege in America. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the Wilson family's remarkable story of turning discrimination into lasting change. Until next time, remember that true transformation begins with recognizing injustice and having the courage to stand against it, no matter who you are. This story reveals how discrimination operates on multiple levels in society. The Wilson sisters, despite their exceptional credentials, faced immediate suspicion and mistreatment based solely on their race. Their experience highlights how privilege functions invisibly for some while creating constant barriers for others. Malcolm Wilson's dual identity strategy demonstrates that systemic change requires working both within and outside established power structures. By operating as civil rights attorney Malcolm Wilson and billionaire Harrison Davenport, he could apply external pressure through legal challenges while simultaneously transforming systems from within through economic influence. The transformation at the terminal shows that meaningful change requires more than just replacing biased individuals. It demands redesigning entire systems and protocols to eliminate opportunities for discrimination. When structures are changed, behavior follows. Perhaps most importantly, this story teaches us that justice is both immediate and long-term. While confronting individual instances of discrimination provides necessary relief, lasting transformation requires patient strategic efforts across generations. The Wilson family's journey reminds us that fighting for equity isn't just about personal vindication, but about creating enduring systems that recognize everyone's humanity equally. Have you ever witnessed or experienced discrimination that made your blood boil? How did you respond in that moment? Share your story in the comments below. Your experience might help someone else navigate similar situations. If this tale of justice and transformation resonated with you, hit that like button to help more people discover it. Subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories that challenge how we think about race, privilege, and justice in America. And don't forget to share this video with someone who needs a reminder that change is possible even in the most entrenched systems. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the Wilson family's remarkable story. Remember, transformation begins with recognition, continues with action, and endures through commitment.